Welcome to this week's episode of Pondering, Play and Therapy with me, Philippa. And this week, my guest is Claire. So, welcome back, Claire. You were on the podcast a fair few months ago now, talking about mental health, childhood mental health, CAMS. So, we thought we'd get you back on and look at some more specific concerns really that families, parents, professionals have. And this week we're going to talk about school anxiety because that's feels like it's a big thing sometimes for quite a few children. It feels like for me that there is more school anxiety than when I, a very long time ago, was at school. I don't know if it is or if we're just more able to verbalize it, to understand it. What would your thoughts be?
Yeah, it's it is a difficult one. If since last time my role slightly changed, so I'm now focusing more in terms of the early intervention. So it's thinking about young people who are in school and experiencing those early kind of elements that are impacting upon them within the environment. And I would say 8, if not 9 out of 10 referrals all identify anxiety and anxieties within the school environment. Now, whether that's because we've got better at naming it and articulating it in the world of well-being, or whether the pressures have increased, I can't quite say. But I would say, without there being any kind of hard evidence, it's both. And I think it's really difficult to sometimes pinpoint what this is because all of it's anxiety, but actually, anxiety, there are different levels of anxiety and it presents in different ways for our young people for a multitude of reasons, but it is very prevalent.
Yeah, and I suppose school pressures have changed, haven't they? From certainly from when I was at school, there is a lot more requirement for our children in the mainstream to attain, and it feels like that the band that they go down is narrower than a long time ago when I was at school, 30 years, 40 years ago. Which, gosh, I don't like saying that. When I was there, I felt there was a lot more sports. There was a lot more range of what you could do. Although you still needed to pass your exams, there was still pressures to do GCSEs and A levels and things like that. But I wonder if the expectations and the tests for children can be more challenging. Some kids are going to thrive, aren't they? Because that's where they learn really well. I was at a quiz night last night, and of the whole of the quizzes, I answered one question. And that was, who is this bear? And it was Baloo. And that was the only question that I could get because my brain doesn't hold facts and information. So doing exams is really hard. So if you're a kid who has got that going on, that must, and it would create anxiety for me.
Mhm.
But if you're a little person, you must struggle with that.
Absolutely. And it's changed and it's evolved, hasn't it? That the pressures that we see in schools now and the relevance with exams. And we see it as early as when they're starting the SATs and that pressure instantly, how that is communicated within school. We've got some tests coming up and they're really important, and this is paving the way for your future. So we see that kind of exam stress and the pressure around education happening very early on. And then obviously a next big point is coming up to GCSEs, and you're thinking about your year 11s and your year 10s leading up to it. But again, it's that language and the ethos within the school where, this is a really big deal. This is the be all and the end all. this is the amount of revision you should be doing. So a lot of expectations are set out. A lot of information is shared. And what do you do with that? Because everybody is aware to some degree GCSEs are important, or it's an important milestone within education. But even if we think about the context of exams, the transition for young people from primary schools or from middle schools to high school, instantly we go into that discussion of, and I remember it quite clearly myself. So on your introduction evening, we are promoting independence. You are now going into those more young adult years. You have to be responsible for this. So your child must be doing this. And as a parent to hear, that's quite daunting. But also for young people sat there, actually, yes, we want that independence and autonomy to be grown and all the other skills that come with that. But there still needs to be that nurture there. This is a huge transition, very different environment, very different expectations, where it is all about succeeding. It's the educational arena. And schools do this very differently. But equally, there is that same pressure that's always there with your exams. As a wellbeing and mental health service, we're always gearing ourselves up for this year and thinking about the stages of what we will see with the young people. So it might be that we see the anxieties coming out quite earlier, that fear of failure, what's the future going to look like? And then coming up to the crucial parts to close to the exams where we see young people that from one end of the scale, they've totally shut down. Lots of procrastination because it just feels so overwhelming for them. To the other end of the scale, where we have those perfectionistic tendencies and they are putting 100% into it, but actually increasing their work and their productivity is having the opposite effect because the brain can't retain the information. The rate at which they are revising and doing their work is having such an impact upon them that it doesn't end up being productive. And then they start to fail, and then it's a downward spiral with that.
I guess I wonder when you were talking now, I was thinking about that fight, flight, freeze response that actually, rather than being regulated and in our whole brain, which is where we learn, isn't it? When we're accessing all our brain, we're feeling safe, we're feeling regulated, and therefore we can learn, we can adapt, we can do all those sorts of things. If actually at either ends, that's what it made me think about is we're actually in survival mode, which is I've just got to get through this, which actually shuts down that learning part of our brain. So we're not going to learn because actually we're just surviving each day, surviving those feelings. So it's a threat response that's been triggered rather than that connected, supported part that we want. Would that be right?
Absolutely. When we are in that kind of calm, more relaxed state, majority of things feel much easier to do. But when we have a million and one things on our minds, because it's not just exam stresses, we're navigating friendships, we're navigating the school environment, we're navigating what's happening at home in terms of what's happening with your parents and in the wider family network. Life happens. And then we're suddenly thrust within the environment of we've got GCSEs coming up and we have so much information given to us, which is great. There's fantastic resources, but what do we do with it? And the anxiety builds and that sense. And the key word is I'm overwhelmed with it. I just feel overwhelmed and I don't know what to do with this. So when you are heightened with all of that worry about it, and then the thoughts are, what's going to happen? What's going to happen if I fail? What's going to happen if I don't do well? What's my future going to look like? And Parents, of course, want their children to do well, and they'll be doing that encouragement from the home side of things. And equally, at school, there's an assembly about it. There's a session on it. There's extra lessons that are happening. So when do you ever get a break away from this, apart from when you're in bed at night and you're trying to rest? And of course, as we know, that's a key time when thoughts run away with themselves. So we then have impact upon the sleep, then we're waking up, then we're tired. And it's a constant hamster wheel of running this. For us, 6 months might not seem a very long time, but in the world of a young person, it feels like forever. Where do you get reprieve from it? Where do you get a break from it? And equally, we then get to the point where we're doing work with young people to say it's okay to have a break. It's okay not to think about it on a Saturday, or it's okay to have half term away from this. But then when you're doing other activities, you're not engaged in it. You're not enjoying it. You're not enjoying being with your family, because we end up with those thoughts of, I should be revising, or I'm feeling guilt for this. And there's no enjoyment in the activities that you would normally do. So again, even when we try and implement positive strategies to help, you can't engage in it because that anxiety, that underlying tone is still there, or it becomes so much for people that they shut down and then, worst case scenario, disengage from the whole education process.
Okay, so that's exams, but I'm thinking that there are other kinds of stresses that also go on in school. So you've got exams, and I guess also the pressure of coursework, all those sorts of things, the attainment really, but there's also, I think, just moving into a bigger school with all those other pupils. If you go to a small school, a middle school, or a primary school, depending on the system where you are, and then all of a sudden you go into a high school, there is much, much more change goes on in the day, isn't it? That you're moving from one class to another, you're moving upstairs, you're moving downstairs. You're moving with a range of pupils. Some of them are like adults, aren't they? Really,
Yeah.
if you're little if you're a
Yeah.
little year seven, which would be for people who aren't in the UK, kind of age 11, you can be in with sixth formers who are 18, can't you? Sometimes moving
Yeah.
around. And that just in itself, just being in a space where there's all these bodies of people that you've got to navigate where you go. You've got to get to the right classroom. You've got to find the right teacher. You've got to remember to collect your cooking stuff from your locker, or not leave your coat there before you get the bus, or all the millions of things that are just your school day. I
Yeah.
imagine for some people, that is just really overwhelming and anxiety provoking.
Of course. It's a world away. It's a world away. And I think sometimes the numbers, the environment, and again, it's that expectation. It's the learning, it's getting used to a new system. And I think I'd alluded to it before as well, that transition from lower schools to high schools are absolutely a key time for young people, because for all the reasons you've said, it's really anxiety provoking. And I think in some ways there's excitement in there for young people as well, because you've got that, I'm going up to big school. So I think there's an element of excitement as well as the apprehension. And I think schools do their very best to try and ease that. But I think for some of our young people, where that becomes particularly tricky is when we're thinking about young people who are neurodivergent. So if we're thinking about young people who have autism, young people who have ADHD, and again, some of our young people who have a lot of predisposing factors, which means they are very anxious by their very nature, need a lot of routine and a lot of consistency.
And I guess
And that's,
sorry, I was going to say, I
uh,
guess those attachment figures as well. If you've had disruptive attachments in your early life and you're now having to change teachers
yeah,
all the time, that again can be quite difficult, can't it? That's part of that diversity, neurodiversity, that diverse need that actually to feel safe, you need a
yeah,
consistent figure, don't you?
yeah. And I think that's what it, this is an area that does bring about huge change, because you will find that within the primary schools or within middle schools, and I know from my experience of why we picked the middle school for our daughter, it's thinking about they have a really good nurture program there. They have well-being ambassadors there. And they really think about a holistic approach to young people's well-being and recognize that even in the education environment, yes, expectations are there, but there's still children that require that nurture. So absolutely key relationships are built up within pastoral departments, with teachers that they have, with their form tutor. And those are really key relationships for young people, because a lot of what we hear is it's not necessarily that we're wanting schools to fix the mental health problem or to necessarily address directly the well-being issues, but it's creating that ethos that nurtures the growth and development of the child, their confidence, their self-esteem. And the biggest thing for young people is just knowing that at home, I may get heard there and actually it feels safe. But when I go to school, I want to know that there's somebody there that I can go to that can hear me, not necessarily fix it, but they take the time to hear me and validate how I feel. And then it helps to forge those connections, that it is a safe environment to go to. And equally, for some young people, the school environment is perhaps the most consistent and safe
Mm.
environment for them. So again, having those connections to know that I could go to somebody if I wasn't feeling okay, I will be heard. And whether it's sitting down with a cup of hot chocolate and having a bit of a chit chat, it makes the world of difference, and it encourages young people to keep engaging with that system. You go to high school, that's gone. But, and that's not to say that everything's gone, because equally, some really good relationships are built with form tutors, etc. But it's on a very different platform than what you'd see previously. So when you say about those relationships and attachments, it's very different. And some high schools are absolutely fantastic and still ensuring that connection is there, and they do the transition work again, really important, so that young person has that almost a care passport that goes with them, that actually, here were some of my difficulties, this is what helped, these are going to be some of the challenges for my future. And how does that information go from one school to another school, and those connections are made again?
And I guess from one teacher to another when you're in high school, because you might have a couple of teachers who have the time and the space and are able to read it and think, okay, yeah, I've got this. They need to sit at the front. I need to check in with them twice in a lesson. They need this and this. And others maybe who have multiple roles within the school that just don't have the time to do that. So that,
Yeah.
so I guess the experience of the child, the young person, is going to be different with different teachers in different lessons, just because humans are different anyway. But then if that if that kind of understanding of their needs or what is going to support them to be in the lesson isn't known for whatever reason, then that again, I guess, has an impact. That inconsistency can feel really scary if you have got kind of neurodiversity, but even just being a typically developing child, it's scary. You might have more resources to pull upon, mightn't you? That I guess that's what we're thinking. There might be just a few more resources if you haven't got other challenges for yourself as well within that day-to-day environment.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it's really hard on in one respect for schools because there are a large number of children, and there are a large number of children. No one child is ever going to be the same, but it's almost like we have this box where we've got the average child that fits in there. Then we extend the box where there might be some children who are struggling with emotional well-being, and we extend the box a bit further because actually there are children who are neurodiverse and their needs are different. So how wide do we keep going with that box, and how much can we expect from schools to be able to support and address the difficulties as well as meet the needs? So I can see that it can be tricky navigating that just in a general sense. But then we have teachers who can adapt and work with the needs really well. And for other teachers, their approach is completely different. And their understanding might be different. And I guess that's where our services come in to help develop knowledge within schools to understand that. But how we just can't fit everybody into that same box. And I think that's where some of the anxieties also present for young people, because we all have to get on. We all have to be friends. We all have to respect one another. And that's great. We're trying to teach our children how to have a positive approach to people and friendships, but that does not work in reality. You are with people that you don't like. You are
Mm.
grouped with people who you find are mean. You are with people that you don't have or share the same interests, but you all have to get on. Whilst, just as the average person, and we think about development, you've got to fathom your way through friendships. Where do I fit in this chain? Am I with the populace? Am I with the IT lot? Am I with this? And there's still that language now of whether it's the IT, it's the SWATs, it's the really nerdy people, or it's the really smart people, or it's the really popular group. There's this whole boxing of where you fit within your friends, as well as all of us having to respect one another in an environment. And it doesn't fit. And again, a lot of anxieties we see are just about navigating friendships.
Mm.
How do I navigate this when the people that I'm actually spending my lunchtime with, my break times with, I'm sat next to them in lessons, and I don't like them and they're not nice to me? What do you do with that?
Absolutely. And so all that kind of, you can see how then children, young people begin to think, I just can't do this. Because as an adult, we'd change jobs, wouldn't we? If that's what I was
Yeah.
feeling in my job, I'd be like, I'm done. Here's
Mm,
me, give me 3 months' notice, I'm off. You would just change jobs, you'd go and do something else, wouldn't you?
yeah.
But as a child, you don't have that choice. You've got to, or you're supposed to turn up every day and go into maths, go into science, go into cooking, go into. Some of us maybe didn't turn up every day, and some of us chose to do different things.
Yeah.
And the truant officer would come round and see your mother, and I don't even know if they have truant officers anymore. I'm sure they do in a different form. But
Yeah.
but again, you can see how it starts to become overwhelming. And I'm joking about it, but you would change your job. If that
Yeah.
was your life, you definitely wouldn't keep going, would you? But we
No.
have to make, or we should be making our children go into that environment where they're being bullied, where they're feeling unheard, where they're feeling overwhelmed, where the system's not fitting for them, where it's eroding their self-esteem day after day. and their needs aren't being met for whatever reason. This isn't a judgment about schools. It's probably a
Mm,
judgment about a system that we've got. It's not about the individual teachers because there's some great
no.
ones out there. They're
Mm.
trying to work in a system themselves. So what do you start to see? So if you were a parent or somebody supporting a young person, what when it starts to get a little bit more, a little bit tricky, what are they going to start to see in their child that is going to start to be concerning, do you think?
Unfortunately, the one thing that you would hope is that they would come and talk to you doesn't happen.
Hmm.
But we start to see changes in mood. And again, it's really difficult because there is mood disturbance, shall we say. As a teenager, you're up, you're down. And I guess it's just tracking your child's behavior and moods in the sense of we know we've got more slammed doors. We know we've got more talking back. But actually, in between that, we've still got those glimmers where they're okay. And that's where you think, oh, I've got my child back just for that moment. And you've had a hug and you've just connected. And then all of a sudden, one of the friends calls, they're off, they're gone, you've lost them again. So it's just finding what's that norm at that moment in time. And it's thinking about, is something slightly changing? Are we now getting into more of an isolative behaviour? Is that conversation or those little moments of where we're engaging disappearing? Needless to say, we've not mentioned social media
Mm.
and all of that yet. And it's keeping those conversations open. But again, not prying too much because the chances are we get very little information. But we sometimes get information at about 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock when we should be going to bed. And then there's a case of, oh, this happened today. So it's spying those moments to have those conversations. And I think it's really hard as a parent because then you want to fix, but actually it's just hearing. It's just keeping a track of what's happening, or just those gentle inquisitive questions where we've picked up a friend's name. Oh, so how is Sarah today? What's going on there? I think
If you don't,
sticking with it.
yeah, if
Sorry.
you don't have a child who does share, because some children don't, do they? They keep it all inside. Is it noticing that they are a little less connected? Because even if they don't talk about their day, there'll be moments where they'll come down and want food off you, so you'll feed them, or they'll come and ask you to fix something, or just come and just hang around, even if then there might only be
Yeah.
small moments. So you've got those moments of connection. So when you're saying more isolative behavior, it's that those, even if they're not chatty, what you're seeing is that there's more and more withdrawal
Yeah.
from the family environment. Would that also be from their social environment as well, if they've got that they want to go out less or they want to engage less?
You
Maybe
know,
go on.
that's a bit of a tricky one because, and the reason I say that is the world has changed. So whereas before we'd see people going out, oh, can I go out with so and so? Can we nip to town? Can we go to the park? Can we do this? That social element has shifted over the years. So actual social elements now are, I'm FaceTiming so and actually there's more time being spent in their room chit-chatting. Whereas before we might be able to monitor about where they're going and what they're doing, there sometimes is more of a preference that actually I'm not going to meet up with my friends, but I am going to FaceTime, I'm going to talk. And again, that's why I would say that it's that encouragement. And like you say, they need to come down for food. So actually, if we're going to eat, are we going to eat together? Or are we going to have a snack together? That encouragement of, oh, are we going to watch a film together or something like that? So that those fleeting moments. But like I say, having those discussions, oh, who have you been chatting to today? And if it's a familiar friend or a same friend that they've been linking in with. And usually you might get a bit of feedback around it, or you might get the sense you can hear it upstairs, for example, if there's lots of laughter going on with the chit chat and the discussions that they're having. So again, it's just keeping that ear out to think about what's happening, or actually has everything gone very quiet? So what are they doing when they're upstairs and they're in the room? And that encouragement to bring them out and thinking about just the basic activities that you might have. So obviously thinking about, we're coming up to half term, so what might we do? Might still go and pick a pumpkin or whatever and do those little activities. And even if they are older, it's just reversing them back to that kind of childhood place again, or even just the elements of nurture as well. Let's just have a hot chocolate, coax them down and engage with them that way and see how they are responding in those moments. But I know personally, and also for parents, the social climate of what we used to measure them by is very different to what we measure them by now.
So we notice, so I'm just thinking about the anxiety. So we're just noticing that it's a little bit more tough, a little bit harder. And I guess that's at one end of the scale. And you can support by doing these, trying to help them connect. I guess also checking in with school, I'm guessing you could do that. Just check in with school and wonder, is there a teacher there, a Senko, special educational needs coordinator, or something like that is just around that can just notice. I guess that's at one end. And then the complete other end of that is where we get to the point where we've got kids who are saying, I just can't go in. I just
Yeah.
can't. I can't do this. What is going on for them, do you think? And
Okay. If I think maybe to the young people that I work with, again, it usually follows on from the transition period. So like we've said before, going into high school, it's a new kind of environment, lots of new things happening. And there seems to be this tolerance that, or the honeymoon period to start off with. So we're trying to adapt, we're trying to fit in. But I think it's crucial to consider that developmental stage as well, that actually, and like I said before, where do we fit in terms of our friendships, socially within society, our sexual orientation, our personal preferences? So it's a really key stage, that 13 and 14, from when this is starting to get established. But if we think about, for example, young people who are neurodivergent, after that honeymoon period, there's the sudden reality that things are not feeling okay, but we can't necessarily put it into words. There's a very big uncertainty around this environment. It's very big, it's very loud, and it starts to feel overwhelming. So those anxieties, which may have been contained and managed a bit more easier at primary school, now we're getting into that big world where we've got the adults and everything. And that anxiety bucket keeps filling up because these are things that are present on a day-to-day basis. The noise, the amount of people, the understanding friendships or any issues that are going on, as well as the learning environment itself. That bucket never empties. It remains if it's left unchecked. And not having the strategies to empty some of these stresses out of the bucket as well. Now, we know that, for example, with autism, nobody comes with a banner that says, I am autistic, and it's very unique and it's very different for every person, and it can get missed. And we don't understand the context of what's happening for young people, and they don't get it. They just know something's different. But because you can't put this into words and you can't necessarily talk about it, and that stress is always there. So the only thing you can do is go to your bedroom, get under the duvet and just let that day go. You're not talking to anybody. Parents don't know how to assist. And absolutely, what do you do? But it ends up coming to a crisis point. So we're not in a position where we can say, look, I've had enough. And sometimes I get feelings that I don't want to be here, or school is too overwhelming for me. So for one of my young people, it was how they described it, an absolute meltdown. Getting ready for school, their friend had come down and they just had enough. Panic, anxiety response at its highest, and they never went back. And again, if I think about another one of my young people, it resulted in that term ending just before summer. And that was it. They couldn't take any more. And they would not leave the house. That was it. Everything just suddenly became too much and they shut down.
So how do you support young people with those kind of feelings? Because I'm guessing the truant officer coming around and saying you've got to send your kid to school isn't going to be that helpful. Although I know that those letters still go out and we get
Yeah,
fined and all those
yeah.
sorts of things. So get your kid in school, do it. And parents are like, do you think if I could get my kid into school, I wouldn't? Do you know what I mean? This is just something I need help with. Do something. I'm telling you, it's been difficult because often these conversations have been going on for a while, haven't they? It doesn't just happen. I know that it can all of a sudden just happen, but often there has been little notices before, and parents have been maybe saying we need some help,
Yeah.
and that hasn't, for again, for whatever reason, this isn't about judging, but it just hasn't been going in, and that it's
Yeah.
got to this crisis point of the young person just saying it's just too much, which is again what you do if it was a job. You'd just go off
Mhm.
sick, wouldn't you? That's literally what you do. You would go off sick
Yeah.
and not go into work, and that's all they're doing, really. That's what I think. They're letting us know that this is, and having somebody say you've got to go isn't going to change it, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
And that's it. Day in, day out. Every day is an absolute battle for one reason or another. The dread of going to school. So, again, not uncommon. Monday to Friday are horrific. Saturday, it's great. Saturday night is great. Sunday daytime is great. Sunday night time, can't sleep. And again, we see young people on the younger end of the scale where you will get parents saying, just don't know what to do. It's so hard because they're bringing their child in who's desperately clinging on to them, doesn't want to go to school, absolutely in tears. Teachers there trying to peel them off and bring them into school, and they eventually settle. But it's such a, for want of a better word, it's that trauma in the morning
Absolutely.
for the parent, for the young person. And again, teachers thinking, how can we coax them in? How can we adapt and make it feel better? So you've got the younger ones. And again, that can go on and morph into something else later down the line. I guess if we think about intervention, earlier intervention, for me, it's thinking about how do we work with the parent and the school to think about, it's really tough. If you're having to do that every morning as a parent, it's got to weigh you down. And it weighs heavy on your heart. Because it's feelings of just, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I've tried everything I possibly can to prevent, they're just going to stay at home now. And sometimes people will take their children out of school.
Yeah.
So it's working with the parents to think about potentially some of the strategies there, but also to hear their experience as well, because it generates a level of anxiety in yourself. So how, what's going on, what's the build up in the morning, and really unpicking some of those maybe underlying niggles that are there as well. What's going on? And sometimes when we open up that arena, we might find we've got a parent who's really ill, and actually the child doesn't want to go to school because they're really worried about that parent, but they're too young to put that into words. And equally, it's working with the school to think about how do they help that transition in the morning into that school environment. Do we have their kind of familiar teacher who they get on really well with? Is there time just to sit down in a quiet, safe space, just to bring it all down and maybe think about what the day is going to look like together? So that's maybe the approach that we think about for the younger ones. But for the older ones, where there is that subtle disengagement, and I think about my young people, but actually, because they won't come out the house now, we go
Mhm.
into the home, and it's unpicking what's happened, but equally where they are right now, because the fear that's then generated about can't even think about accessing education. They know that GCSEs are coming up. They can't even think about that. So actually, whilst other people's goal might be to get them back into school, from a mental health perspective and well-being perspective, it's about what's going on for them right now. And their goal might be, let's just pop down to the local shop,
Mm.
buy some sweets and come back. And that would be a huge milestone for them, because whatever's going on, their bucket is too full. They can't even think about that engagement within the community again.
So, if you've got a kid who's refusing to go into school, then you would working with the school to think about, okay, how do we help the young person maybe access some education whilst we work on their mental health and well-being? Or would you be saying, actually, no, just leave education over there, let's not go anywhere near it and just do this? I suppose I'm saying that, but I'm thinking in my head, I, I wonder if it's a bit of and both. That's not what I'm thinking about, but yeah, a bit of both, depending on the
Yeah,
child and young person. Because I guess some people
absolutely.
might be able to access some learning at home and then do a part-time timetable or go into a lesson that they they've got that connection with the teacher or go into the nurture hub or something like that. Whereas
Yeah.
others maybe can't do any of that.
I think it's difficult when people don't have an answer for what they're seeing.
Mhm.
We can see the behaviour, the refusal, the upset of coming into school, or a very poor attendance. We see the behaviour, but we don't have a reason for it. Therefore, the expectation is you come and you attend school.
Okay, I'm just
Otherwise,
gonna, can I just stop you there? I suppose I'm just thinking, well, you've just told me all the reasons for it. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? That's what I would like. We do have a reason for it, don't we? We might not be able to, but we do have a reason for it. We know that.
but we don't know that from an education perspective, perhaps. We can, I know it. Parents may know it because they hear, they see their child. But what I'm saying is, what is the reason for not coming in? The reason is you're finding friendships difficult. That's not a reason not to be coming in school.
Okay, so what? That's what the school would be saying. This is not. It's not okay because you're being bullied.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, okay. So that as a parent, it's really hard to hear, I would imagine.
absolutely. Because you see the emotion of your child. And
Yeah.
again, this is not putting schools in a negative light,
Mm, no.
but there is a practicality that's there. You do not, as a education provider, know all the ins and outs of young people and their lives and their circumstances. And equally, going to school as a young person, you know that you've got to behave. So you do your very best. And then when you get home, it all just shoots out. So my point of this is whatever's been seen in terms of the young person's behaviour, there is a reason for it. And we know that. There's always a reason for a behaviour. And part of our role is to help others understand that. Sometimes as parents, we can't make sense of it, but equally for schools, because they don't know every circumstance of every child. But actually, if we can help to say, for example, this family, dad's really unwell, mum has some mental health difficulties and is gaining support herself right now. And the young person is really worried because when so and so was upset before, they left the home for a period of time, for example, to gain support. So there's an uncertainty there. But actually, how could we help school, with the consent of the parents, to understand the context a bit more, that there is a genuine fear that this young person has, that the parent may not be there when they go back home, that even though they're only tiny or young, I was thinking 6 or 7, they're aware that the parent is not well. Home is not being consistent, and that's nobody's fault. But why would they want to come to school? Because they want to be with their key caregivers. So it's helping schools to sometimes understand the context of what's happening. But equally, the behaviour that you're seeing is perfectly, for want of a better word, normal. It is to be expected under the circumstances. So we are going to have to give the child a little bit of space. Recognise that some days they're not going to be coming in. Recognise that actually when they do come in, it's going to feel really difficult. Like you said, do we have a reduced timetable? Do we keep those connections there? Because the connections with school and with friendships are really important, even though we've said sometimes they can be really difficult. But that social environment can also be really positive to socialize, to learn, to have that sense of achievement and mastery, which is vital. But if we can have that joint understanding about the difficulties that are presenting in that young person's world, we as the grown-ups, the professionals around them, can adapt to that and add flexibility to allow time, because it isn't just a case of let's send them to therapy and we can fix that. No, this is going to remain for quite a while, and the behavior will shift. Sometimes it'll prove to be really, really tricky, and some days there'll be good days. But we need to adapt with the child over the coming months, year, etc. Because sometimes we can't change the situation for that child, but we can work around and wrap around the child.
Yeah. And I'm guessing we're going to be running out of time, and I think we probably need to do another episode. So I guess as those children that can't return back into school and need alternative provisions, let's just park that because I think that's a massive topic on itself. I suppose what I'm thinking about is for children who do have anxieties, who are really struggling to go into school, but the school can adapt. There are things can't that schools can do by providing quiet spaces for them to go, by allowing them to listen to music or things like that, by helping them when they've got exams or tests to do it in a separate room or in a small group, or having music or having prompts, or for kids who like daydream, having somebody just go and touch their shoulder and help them to remember to focus back on there, about having a, like you say, that connection, that key worker or one or two, or being able to leave a classroom if they are getting a little bit anxious without having to explain that, miss, kind of, because lots of schools will say, yeah, but they can leave, they just have to ask. And it's the asking is the anxiety stuff, isn't it? It's about they just need to be able to go, and then if they are in the corridor, that somebody's not going to say to them, "Why are you out of class?" And then they've got to try and
Yeah.
explain. And so there are things that can happen, can't they, that can help to reduce the anxiety somewhat. But I suppose it's giving a young person strategies and resources to manage, because sometimes that's what isn't there, is our own internal resources to be able to manage this feeling. And it's how do we as the adults give these children, scaffold them really, their emotional experience by providing resources that they can pull on, that slowly over time, hopefully they'll build their own. But just for a period, we just need to give that to them externally. Would that be right?
Yeah. And some of the schools do a fantastic job, and they also have, if we think about their mental health leads as well, they have a really good handle on emotional well-being of our young people. And they have programs and groups within schools. And again, for schools, it is accessible in majority of schools now, and it will be even wider. So if we think about the mental health teams that we have in schools working alongside mental health leads in schools as well, it's thinking about, they have certain provisions and it's called different things in different areas, but think about, how's your mood today? How do we name it? How can we feel it in the body? How do we make sense of it? And for the older, slightly older age group as well, it's thinking about those friendships. How do we integrate? How do we deal with those kind of tricky feelings that we have right now? But there are a lot of practical things that they put in place, like you've said, quiet rooms, quiet space, someone that they can link in with. And yes, sometimes it's hard to do that. So it might be that we have some set times when we could meet that are scheduled just for you, so you don't feel like, one of the comments, oh, they're really busy, I didn't want to disturb them. So we could have those set times there. But I would say for any parent, linking in with the mental health lead within that school, have those discussions. And it might be that accessing some lower level support, just thinking about, what do we do with the big emotions? How could we develop our toolbox of, actually, when this is happening, what do I need right now? And thinking through that. And it might be a timeout card where you just put it on your desk and you walk out, you don't need to say anything. So there are I think over the years, this has really developed, which is fantastic. And schools put a heck of a lot of time into this as well. But the anxieties and the pressures, whether that's exams, whether it's transitioning, whether it's because you have additional needs and there's a uniqueness to you. So we're thinking about neurodivergence, that has increased and it's not going to go away. And we've got to adapt with that.
And I think as parents, it can be difficult, can't it? Especially like you email a school and then you don't get a response, or the response is in 2 days' time and you phone somebody. I would say, this is just from my personal point of view, is just email everybody. But when my kid was in year 9 and 10, I was on first name terms with quite a few of the teachers because I just made myself a nuisance. And I didn't care really, because that they listened to me then. Because if you don't push, and that's not that the teachers they were fantastic, but they had so many other things that were pressures, that they see the email come in and they think I'll get back to it. And they really meant to get back to it, but then it drifts for a couple of days. But for your kids, those couple of days are really tricky, that needs managing at
Absolutely.
that moment. So as a
Yeah.
parent, just as a parent, I just used to email everybody. I would go and sit in reception and say, I'll just wait. I'll just wait until they're free. It's fine. And they would become free and they would see me. And I am bullshit. I know that I've got a bit more confidence, but I suppose sometimes as parents, we have to do that work, don't we, to get schools to really get what's going on for our kid. And it's not that they don't want to, it's just that they've got so many other things that we almost have to push our kid to the top of their priority list. That's what I think. And
Yeah.
we can do that by just being very present within the school. And,
Yeah, I'm not advocating boycotting all the receptions of schools across the land. But what I would say is, I think sometimes parents hold back. And when I speak with parents, they'll say, we thought there was something. I'd done an assessment not long ago, and actually, it was just like, yeah, we thought this. We thought there was something different about our child, but we didn't quite know how to raise it because we couldn't necessarily say it's this and this. Because equally, when my child goes to school, they are the perfect model
mm,
child. But when they come home, all hell breaks loose because they've had to hold everything in from that day. So my advice is link in with your mental health lead, your wellbeing
mm,
lead. Absolutely. Have those discussions. And just because you only see it at home, you need school to be aware so they can
mm,
look out and observe those nuances. Because if we are going to get specialist support moving forward, school are a part of that. Parents are a part of that. Our kids are at school for the big
yeah.
portion of time. And just to know that you've got somebody at school who is keeping those observations can really help to ease those worries for
Mm.
parents as well. And have a think about what the services are available around in that area. But majority of schools will have some wellbeing support
Mm.
in there as well. So explore what that might look like.
Because parents really are the expert in their kids. You can access all these other
You know
things,
what?
but
I argue to death with that, PK, because I know people say that, but as a parent, I do not feel, even as a therapist, I still do not feel like I am the expert sometimes with my child because the goalposts
you
change.
yeah, you might not be the expert in unpicking the tiny bits, but you are the expert when you know there's something different with your child. You can feel, even if they're saying everything's okay, you can feel that. I'm not sure that there is. You might not know what that is. You might need support, extra support for it. You might need somebody to come along and unpick it. You might need your best friend to come along and have a really nice chat or all those sorts of things. But you have to trust, I think, as a parent, your own instinct, because that's where you are the expert. Nobody else has that
Yeah.
thing that you do. Even if you don't know what that thing is, you know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And going in and
And
saying, go on.
yeah, and that's why I think, like when I was previously in Carmen's, is thinking about parents come to you at the absolute end of their tether where they will say, we have been pushed from pillar to post, from service to here, and now we're here. And that's pressure then sits with you that they are looking for an answer. And it is out of sheer desperation of over years and years saying, something doesn't quite fit for my child, something slightly different. I don't know what it is. And then parents go, and it's just the right to choose, or all sorts of different avenues to think, do we need that assessment? Don't we? But the frustration that parents then hold, and they're so tired and lost, they just want their child to be happy and okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess what we're saying, we just need to come to an end. Well, I guess what we're saying is that school anxiety is pretty normal, typical at one end. That
Yeah.
most children at some point are going to have some level of school anxiety, whether that's over exams, whether it's over friendship, whether it's over things that are going on at home and they don't want to leave home or I mean, it can be as simple as that you've got a new baby sister or brother, isn't it? And you don't want to leave them at home with your
Yeah,
mum. And do you know what I mean? Or it can be simple things, but that can create big feelings. And those
yeah,
big feelings are just as valid as anything else. And it's about recognizing, holding, and working through with the young person and the school that actually this is going on. And that dialogue is important, even when people think, oh, it's just nothing. Actually, it's something for your child. Let's
yeah,
let the school know, or the school let's let the parent know that there's actually had
yeah,
this little rupture with a friendship in the canteen, and we just need you to know about that so that those conversations can go on. But that would be typical for many children, right through to actually, I'm really overwhelmed and I can't do this. And at this point, there's probably lots of things going on. It may be just about school, it's often a bit more complex and needs a little bit of unpicking. And maybe that's where you need that more expert support in. But if you can start to have those conversations in the middle of that thing and in the middle of that spectrum and start to say, actually, I'm noticing. What are
yeah,
we going to do? How are we going to support? And just really, I suppose for me, it's about letting our kids know that actually it's okay. It's okay to have these big feelings. We might not always have the answers, and sometimes we don't know what to do even as adults, but it's almost being honest about that, isn't it? Because that can
mm.
validate a young person's feeling of actually it's really hard to get up today and I don't want to go in, but that there is
That's
support.
one of the important bits as well, the validation of that feeling and not being dismissed with it as well. And I think my advice to any parent would be it's not about the parent needing to fix it. Sometimes it's just hearing that it's really tricky. They just want to tell you, they just want that hug. And that is more powerful than any kind of therapy, really, that you can have. But even if you're detecting those little odd bits very early on, and you can feel that there's a bit of anxiety there or a little bit of snappiness or anger coming out in your child, link in with school,
Mm.
link in with their wellbeing department, and do not be afraid to access the support that, any of those mental health teams that are in school for that early intervention. It's a gentle introduction to helping them access some of the tips and the tricks that could help. That might be all that they ever need just to tip that course back on the right track. And absolutely, so don't be afraid to use it. It's there. School is rife with lots of triggers, lots of anxiety bits in there. And then, if further support is required, again, it's a good introduction to gaining support for your well-being. And if something else is needed, obviously there are other services available, but don't be afraid to access it.
Well, that's a great place to end there, Claire. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll definitely have you back on to talk about social media, I think, because that was the one thing that we didn't touch on here,
Oh,
and maybe when we need to move out of mainstream. But thank you for your time, and
yeah.
yeah.